In this module, we will recap on what the term VOC means. VOC is an acronym that translates into Voice of the Customer. Let's spend a minute reminding ourselves of some of the key approaches for collecting VOC. Customer complaints. Understanding what your customers want by analysing what they don't want. Be a customer. Going and being a customer yourself at your work or at a competitor's. Interviews. Talking to customers one by one with a set series of questions. Focus groups. Talking to customers in a small group with a set series of questions. Surveys. Asking customers to complete a questionnaire about a variety of requirements and their experiences. These are the most common, but let's look at a few more methods emerging in the modern world. Customer service calls. If your organisation has a call centre, then you have a valuable source of customer feedback and insight. It's just a matter of capturing it. Most call centres have a team of quality monitoring staff. They listen to calls and score the performance, but they could also be used to capture VOC data if they were trained appropriately. Speech analytics. This is similar to the previous method of listening to customer calls. However, rather than completed manually by quality monitoring colleagues, you can use software to analyse all your customer calls. The advances in this field over the last few years have been astonishing. While still a relatively new field with few companies using this technology, be prepared to see this become the norm in a few years. This software can detect pauses, uncertainty, poor listening skills, tone of voice of both the customer service advisor and the customer, and any key words you may be looking for. Lastly, there is the social media. By data mining social media platforms such as Twitter, Tumblr, Facebook, Pinterest or LinkedIn, companies are gaining valuable insight into what their customers really think and feel. Once you have collected the vital VOC data, in whatever method you choose, you need to spend time analysing it. Understanding the voice of the customer is essential to any business, but actually using the data gathered to narrow the gap between the customer's experience and their expectation is a real skill, and if done correctly, will directly affect your bottom line. What do I mean? Well, most customers expect a friendly, polite service every time they are interacting with your company. In this day and age, your customers expect this as a minimal level of service. The reality is, often this is not the customer experience. For whatever reasons, sometimes customer service is severely lacking. Let's look at some of the common reasons why one of the most basic requirements, delivering good customer service, is not met. The organisation doesn't measure customer satisfaction. The organisation doesn't do anything with the customer satisfaction data it collects. The organisation doesn't prioritise what improvements need to be worked on based on the customer's view. Employees are not accountable for customer satisfaction performance. The organisation does not benchmark performance against competitors. The organisation measures customer satisfaction, but the metric is not as important as service levels or costs. Any of these sound familiar? If they do, your organisation is missing an opportunity to listen to the voice of their customers to drive improvements. If your company spent time making your customers' experiences match or exceed their expectations, you'll likely see an increase in profitability. Once you start a VOC campaign, you need to see it through. even if you find out information that you don't perhaps like or that sits well with the company ethos. Your board of directors or senior managers may have to make some tough decisions based on what your customers tell you. You may have to change a product price, quantity, or actually even the marketing. Let's look at a real-life example. Walker's Crisps ran a focus group of adults aged between 25 and 35 to find out their favourite brand of crisps. The results were unexpected. Their favourite brand were crisps from their childhood called Monster Munch and are no longer sold. Owning the rights to Monster Munch crisps, Walker's decided to act on the feedback and spent a lot of money remarketing, rebranding and adapting the flavours to ensure an exciting new relaunch that would attract the children of today. Within days of the relaunch, Walker's started to receive a large volume of complaints about the new Monster Munch. The new Monster Munch was smaller than the old Monster Munch, and that the general public were not happy. Furthermore, the much-loved old monsters and flavours had changed too much. The relaunch was deemed a failure, and after a while, the product was discontinued. And no wonder. You see, Walker's had the right idea. They asked their customers what their favourite crisps were, but then they forgot to ask more questions and find out why. What is it about their favourite that they liked? Instead, they raced off trying to appeal to a new generation and lost all the reasons why they were loved in the first place. Many years later, Walker's tried again to relaunch Monster Munch, this time fully having understood what their customers wanted. The crisps have returned to their original larger size, and the packs include retro designs based on the original packs, featuring 3 of the original 4 monsters. By asking some simple questions, the first time Walker's could have saved literally millions of pounds in launching a product that did not meet the requirements of their customers. One way to ensure that you cover off all aspects of a VOC campaign is to follow a simple cycle or process. Collect VOC using your chosen method, ideally use a mix of more than one. Analyse the data, use the CTQ translation technique we have already taught you in this as the starter for 10. Score the feedback. Use a consistent rating or scale so that you can be sure that if the feedback is negative, it is always scored as negative. Benchmarking will help you here. Extract the feedback, both good and bad. The power is in the negative feedback. Here you will find improvements to work on. Feedback to the employees. If your VOC was about a product or service, then you need to feed it back to the people, or ideally the individual who delivered that product or service. Once you have extracted the main points, analysed them and fed them back, you need to agree on an action plan and a priority order of how to improve upon them. You need to make sure these actions are completed. Voice of the customer is the most accurate and reliable method of attaining, analysing and interpreting customer and potential customers' feedback data. Voice of the customer is analytic research emphasising material significance, identifying those things that matter to people in the real world. Voice of the customer is now the gold standard in customer research practised by leading companies as diverse as Ford, T-Mobile, and recently the Bank of Canada. There have been some very bad performance in hospitals in the UK over the last few years. Poor standards of care have led to a large number of unnecessary, preventable deaths. The blame has landed squarely on the performance measures put in place. Supposedly, these measures encouraged management to focus on the wrong things and behave poorly. But where was the voice of the customer measure? If they were measuring voice of the customer, poor standards of care would have been fed back instantly by patients, friends and family members. Perhaps the government has started to think differently. The current Prime Minister has endorsed the use of the voice of the customer in the NHS with the introduction of the Friends and Family test. This test contains one simple question. Would you recommend it to your friend and family? If not, then why not? Why is it not an acceptable level of service? This small test will capture relevant voice of the customer data to improve the NHS.